Hello and welcome. Thank you for taking time to learn more about the Michigan State School Aid Fiscal Year 25 Section 31A legislative updates. This webinar will include an overview of the intent and purpose of Section 31A funding, the assurances associated with the use of Section 31A, and information on the Opportunity Index bands and how funding multipliers are determined. We will also share information on subsection 14 and the new funding flexibilities for eligible districts. Section 31A is a categorical grant in the State School Aid Act. It is reviewed and updated by legislators each year and is designed to provide supports and services to close gaps and reduce barriers for at-risk eligible students. Legislation defines the intent and purpose, assurances, allowable uses, eligibility criteria, and reporting and monitoring requirements. The intent of the funding is to support academic achievement and regular school attendance. Academic achievement is described in this legislation as ensuring proficiency in English language arts by the end of 3rd grade, proficiency in math by the end of 8th grade, and ensuring students are career and college ready by high school graduation. Legislation also defines the assurances or requirements for districts who accept this funding. These include complying with the Read by Grade 3 law, utilizing early literacy and mathematics resources, implementing a tiered system of support for all grade levels served, or a multi-tiered system of support framework. If the district operates a school breakfast program, legislation requires that the district must supplement their school breakfast program by designating an amount between 1 cent and $10 per student who has been identified as economically disadvantaged in the previous fall count. Districts must also complete the annual program and fiscal report, the APFR, by July 15th of each year. This slide lists the eligibility criteria defined by legislation, the qualifying characteristics for which students can receive supplemental instructional support or other direct services. Students need only meet one of the eligibility criteria to be provided Section 31A funded supports. Districts must maintain eligibility documentation and update student eligibility throughout the year. Eligibility worksheets are available on our Section 31A website for districts to reference, download, and revise to meet their needs. This funding has increased significantly in recent years, from $378 million in 2017 to over $1 billion available to districts in the current school year. As a comparison, districts in Michigan will receive just over $400 million in Title I Part A funding, about 40% as much as they will receive from the state in Section 31A this year. We want to highlight the expectation that districts align funding decisions with the MyKit process, approaching school improvement beginning with an analysis of needs, developing research-based plans to address needs, and finally determining funding streams to support the work to ensure that resources are allocated efficiently to address the most critical areas. This needs-based approach allows schools to tailor their improvement strategies to meet the unique needs of their student population, leading to more impactful and targeted interventions. By identifying needs first, schools can create comprehensive plans that address the root cause of issues rather than just applying surface-level fixes. This method ultimately promotes a more thoughtful and effective use of funds, ensuring that every dollar spent directly contributes to meaningful improvements in the educational experience. And just again, Section 31A expenditures should be prioritized to the needs identified in the district's continuous improvement process and meet the intent and purpose of the funding source. Allowable uses include supplemental support for instruction, direct non-instructional services, school health clinics, school parent liaisons, and proactive school security that is delivered through a tiered framework. Things that are not generally allowable include paying for the teacher of record for any classroom, including developmental kindergarten, any type of administrative or leadership position, such as principal, assistant principal, dean of students, or director of curriculum. Those would not be allowable. And if you have specific questions, we encourage you to contact your Section 31A point of contact. Other allowable uses include the opportunity to use funding for school-wide reform for schools where 40% or more of their students have been identified as at-risk eligible. The funding can be used to address needs discovered in a team-based process that includes a comprehensive needs assessment, team-based decision-making, a parent and community engagement component, and a plan to evaluate the reform initiative or program. It can be used for professional learning and implementing a coaching model, for support staff providing services to eligible students, and up to 10% of a district's funding can be used to provide supplemental support in pre-kindergarten. It can also be used for anti-bullying and crisis intervention programs and for the Pathways to Potential program.
Subsection 18 allows districts to use Section 31A funding for pre-kindergarten. It allows districts to use up to 10% of their total allocation for supplemental instructional supports and supplemental direct non-instructional services for students who are identified as at-risk eligible. In the next slide, we'll talk more about how pre-kindergarten programs can be supported.
All right, let's look at some specifics for each of the pre-kindergarten categories that were listed on the previous slide. Thinking about pre-kindergarten, for additional seats, those would be for students that meet Section 31A criteria, but they're not eligible for the Great Start Readiness Program, or the Great Start Readiness Program slots are already full. For professional learning, it follows the same guidelines as professional learning that we discussed earlier. So it still has to be solely related to implementing a coaching model, implementing MTSS with fidelity and utilizing the data from the system, and complying with Read by Grade 3 law. Transportation. Those would be costs for transporting eligible students. Social emotional learning supports. Those would have to be evidence-based SEL programs and instructional and non-instructional supports for the whole child. And then PBIS or MTSS program coaches are generally allowable costs.
We have discussed some of the Section 31A allowable uses. This slide lists unallowable expenditures. Section 31A legislation is reviewed and renewed annually by legislators. It is important for program planners and business office representatives to remain up to date on newly adopted components of the law, as well as areas that have been refined or eliminated, to ensure districts are in compliance with what current legislation has determined to be allowable expenditures. It is the district's responsibility to remain up to date with changes in the law and allowances to remain in compliance. Due to annual legislative changes, there is not an opportunity to grandfather or to allow ongoing expenditures of items that have been eliminated from Section 31A and have become no longer allowable under this section. The Section 31A team updates guidance and technical assistance annually to align with changes in legislation. We provide detailed changes through updates on our website, recorded webinars on the MDE Section 31A YouTube playlists. We provide breakout sessions and live professional learning at our annual Special Populations Conference. and also provide training during local ISD meetings. If your district or LEA needs assistance determining allowability, please reach out to your district's designated Section 31A single point of contact. New this year, eligible districts that are identified within Opportunity Index bands 5 or 6 may utilize grant funds for the expanded allowable uses described in Section 31A-14, including the opportunity to use funding to reduce kindergarten through third grade student-to-teacher ratios in eligible schools, and also to fund retention and recruitment efforts designed to reduce staff turnover and vacancies. Eligible LEAs are required to complete an intent to use funds report that's available in Nexus and to submit it no later than November 1st. Additional information can be found on our frequently asked question document on our website. Districts will also find a link to the 24-25 eligible school lists on our Section 31A website. Legislation requires MDE to audit and monitor the use of Section 31A. This monitoring is completed through desk reviews of districts' annual program and fiscal reports and through on-site reviews. During these reviews, the Section 31A team is looking for evidence that students are being provided with the supplemental support and services aligned with intent and purpose, that initiatives are allowable and monitored to ensure they are having the intended impact, that districts are implementing a multi-tiered system of support for all grade levels served, and that the current year allocation is being expended in the year in which it is provided. As mentioned, all districts who receive Section 31A funding must deliver instruction and services through an MTSS framework to differentiate supports according to each student's unique strengths and needs. We want to highlight the importance of MTSS. Legislation requires districts to implement MTSS for all grade levels it serves. Schools must implement for several compelling reasons. Beyond Section 31A, MTSS is listed as a requirement throughout legislation, including these sections of Michigan School Code: Sections 21H, 23G, 35A, and 54B. It's also required in the new dyslexia legislation. MTSS is called out in the federal Every Student Succeeds Act, and it's backed by a solid foundation of research. MTSS provides a proactive and systematic approach to addressing the diverse academic, behavioral, social, and emotional needs of all students. Here are a few key benefits. Personalized support. MTSS provides different levels of support based on student needs, ensuring that every student receives the right level of support. MTSS ensures early identification. It helps in identifying struggling students early, allowing for timely interventions to prevent more severe issues down the road. MTSS provides a system of data-driven decision-making, relying on continuous monitoring and data collection to make informed decisions about student progress and the effectiveness of interventions. It requires collaboration among teachers, administrators, and families to create a cohesive support system for all students. And MTSS ensures an inclusive environment. By addressing the needs of all students, it promotes an inclusive and equitable learning environment where every student can succeed. This is the 10th year of the MTSS assurance in Section 31A. What does that mean for districts? Districts should be refining their implementation practices, developing a strong data culture, continuing to build teacher capacity and Tier 1 supports. Schools should have a regular cadence of reviewing student work and progress and designing opportunities for just right instruction. And schools should be engaged in ongoing review of the key components of their MTSS framework to ensure fidelity across grade levels and content areas. There are many resources available to support all districts on their trajectory of implementation and improvement. For training, resources, and support, Michigan's MTSS Technical Assistance Center has a team of professionals that can assist with the process. Their resources include copies of tiered fidelity inventories, asynchronous trainings and webinars, and other technical assistance. The Section 31A team has created program monitoring indicators drawn from the specific allowabilities included in legislation. The program monitoring indicators are a great reflection tool for school and district teams to review listed indicators of success and example evidences, and to measure their current level of implementation and design next steps in their continuous improvement efforts. Section 31A requires that districts implement MTSS with fidelity. Research in this area is pervasive. Teams that closely monitor students' current levels of understanding, gather information about appropriate next steps for learning, meet regularly to plan instruction and intervention for all students, including those who exceed grade level expectations, those who are approaching expectations, as well as students who are far from grade level and may require intensive support, and who design just right teaching and learning for each student and group of students, monitor the impact, and make adjustments to enhance effectiveness. Those are the schools that see students, all students, thrive. Because of its importance, the annual program and fiscal report asks a number of questions that require school and district program teams to reflect on all components of MTSS and to report information regarding ongoing professional learning related to MTSS, as well as to report the fidelity tools being used to measure implementation. All districts should be able to list the fidelity tool or tools they are using at the building level to measure MTSS fidelity of implementation. If you have questions about fidelity tools or need additional information about tools that appropriately measure fidelity of MTSS implementation, we encourage you to visit the My MTSS TA Center for resources and training opportunities.
Remember, annually, the following procedures and processes should be reviewed by central and building leaders. Ensuring collaborative planning based on the prioritized needs of eligible students identified in the needs assessments, that all programs paid for with Section 31A must be evaluated for effectiveness and results discussed amongst team members, and that there is a written process and procedure for the 3 times a year identification process for at-risk eligible students, and every district accepting Section 31A funding must have an MTSS handbook that describes the processes and protocols for MTSS in their district. One of the key priorities of Section 31A funding is to support students in achieving regular attendance. Regular attendance is key for students to develop the academic and social skills they need to achieve their greatest dreams. Our students are absent at record rates in Michigan, having the 4th highest chronic absenteeism rate in the nation, according to research this month out of Stanford University. Michigan's chronic absenteeism rate has increased from 20% in 2019 to 39% in the school year ending 22. That means nearly 40% of our students missed at least 3.5 weeks of school during the pandemic. Students often feel left out of the loop and disconnected from learning with a single absence. Chronic absenteeism in Michigan is a significant issue that has serious consequences for academic progress and overall well-being. It is important to address this issue in order to ensure that all students have a fair opportunity to succeed in their education and in their life. In 4th grade reading, Michigan ranked 42nd, with only 28% of our students demonstrating proficiency in reading, well below the national average. By 8th grade, our students' proficiency remains below the national average, and our ranking rises to 35th out of 50. Our 4th grade math scores also rank 35th out of 52 and are below the national average. Attendance Works is an online resource that is also available to schools and districts and can be used together with the EWIMS process to comprehensively build a vibrant, healthy school community where students attend school and thrive. Listed on this slide are key considerations as districts work to create environments where students consistently attend and engage. Efforts to reduce chronic absenteeism in Michigan include implementing various strategies such as tracking and monitoring student attendance, providing support and resources to families and students, and promoting a positive school climate that values regular attendance. Through these efforts, we can work towards improving educational outcomes for all students in Michigan. Chronic absenteeism is a persistent issue in many educational settings. It refers to when students miss an excessive number of days of school, which can have a negative impact on their academic performance and overall well-being. To address chronic absenteeism, it is important to implement a multifaceted approach that involves collaboration between schools, families, and community. Some of the things that are suggested are to identify the root causes, enhance the school culture and engagement, strengthen family and community partnerships, implement early intervention strategies, foster a more personalized approach. By implementing these strategies, schools can work towards reducing chronic absenteeism and ensuring that all students have the opportunity to thrive academically and socially. Now consider a rough estimate. How much time is the district spending in each of the tiered categories for problem-solving attendance barriers? If you glance at the data for Tier 1, which represents the district's preventative policy and procedures, about 20% of the population are experiencing attendance problems, with just some reminders from classroom teachers about unexcused absences every once in a while. Then at Tier 2, there are 30% of students that meet the criteria as being chronically absent or approaching it. Perhaps they are ill, or their parent caregiver is, there is an intermittent transportation issue, or mom and dad is working around the clock and just can't seem to get them to school on time. At Tier 2, the district is spending a lot of time and human assets devoted to barrier busting, problem solving for families, groups of students, and grade levels. But another glance at the data and documentation reveals the majority of the barriers exist at Tier 3, with 50% of these students being severely chronically absent. Tier 3 impacts more individual students with more than 20% chronic absenteeism and have issues that are a little more multi-layered. There are communication issues ranging from no one answering the phone, letters being returned because there is no good address on file, students and families that are experiencing homelessness and trauma, parents who have become caregivers of elderly parents, and students who are barely getting to school because of the priorities for parents. So when looking at this data and documentation from this lens, do we need to change our approach to remove more barriers? Let's explore. Let's begin by breaking down the data into categories. Good work starts with good data. What does the data say about students' attendance and where the LEA needs to devote its time and resources? Review the definitions for regular attendance, chronic absence, and severe chronic absence. Chronic absenteeism has risen markedly since the start of the pandemic and even in the endemic phase. But how are we tackling the issue? What does the LEA data indicate? Using these definitional criteria could make tackling the barriers to attendance a little easier if we think about the categories in this manner. Next, who have we assigned to help in these categories to remove barriers to attending school? Which category will give the district and students the most leverage for getting back on track? Let's take a look at the slide to give you some ideas to take back to the planning team. Recalling what we learned from the last two slides, what's the plan? Where do we target our time and assets? What are red flag triggers? It's the set of criteria an attendance team will use to address attendance barriers and create tailored solutions to the removal of barriers. Research indicates the first call home for unexcused absences is the classroom teacher. In tiers 2 and 3, the key is if the LEA has a significant amount of truancy and absenteeism in both tier 2 and tier 3 areas, if possible, appointing two different teams for two very different treatments. Then again, if the LEA doesn't have a problem with severe chronic absenteeism or missing 20% or more of school, then where should you devote the majority of time and assets? And who can you hire? A school parent liaison, perhaps, or hire two of them. One works on tier 1 and tier 2, the other only works on tier 3 severe chronic absenteeism issues. What is a school parent liaison? This was obtained from Fairfax County Public Schools that has established a cadre of school parent liaisons within their school district communities. Parent liaisons work in the schools and community to help families get the information and assistance they need to support their children and to ensure their academic success. The parent liaisons represent a variety of cultures, languages, and races. Parent liaisons will welcome and orient families who are new to the school community and help them understand the school's culture, policies, procedures, and practices. They can also help connect families to resources in the community. Parent liaisons might also assist the family in transitioning to a new school and encourage parent involvement to help ensure their students' success. The Section 31A grant does not have an application process like federal grants or other state grants. The APFR is the end of year report due by July 15th annually to share how grant funds were spent in allowable ways. This means grant funds must support the intent and purposes of the Section 31A law with emphasis on serving at-risk eligible students with instructional and direct non-instructional supports, implementing MTSS with fidelity, using early literacy and numeracy resources, and supplementing school breakfast programs. Some of the summer costs that are shared on this report may be budgeted, estimated costs due to the grant cycle not being complete in LEAs. The Section 31A Program Office team provides announcements each spring in the MDE official communications, also known as the Thursday communication, about the report being available in Nexus, as well as the Section 31A APFR specific trainings and office hours. In the report, the district reports the specific programming that is provided by category, the count of students that benefited by the supports and services, and narrative responses regarding the implementation of key components of the district's MTSS framework. Due to this being a report and not an application, there is not a formal amendment window. Modifications from extended summer programming can be reported up until September 15th. Please email your SPOC. This is key due to key financial data from the report being pulled forward into the following year's APFR. Another window of opportunity to modify will not open until next April to prepare for the release of the new fiscal year report. Planning for the school breakfast program supplement from the Section 31A grant will need to include a variety of representatives from the district, especially the leaders from your nutrition program. They will have a great lens of what their nutrition grant requirements are to ensure the Section 31A funds are supplemental and not supplanting any of their general grant requirements. The MDE, Office of Health and Nutrition Services, has shared a new guidance document called the Office of Health and Nutrition Services 31A Breakfast Spending Ideas Resource. Please share this guidance with the school nutrition program sponsors, and if they still would like a thought partner on how the Section 31A supplement can support the school breakfast program, they should reach out to the office for allowable Section 31A breakfast supplement uses specific to the district's context and nutrition grants. The decision of how much should be spent per pupil, from a penny to $10, should be determined very early in the school year. This will have to align to the budget planning to ensure that the SBP program has the supplemental needs to help make a robust nutrition program that meets the students' basic needs and help with brain development. While the educational program supports and services are also receiving enough funds to also support the academic and attendance purposes. This is part of the continuous improvement process, where braiding and blending of various funding sources, including general ed, nutrition grants, federal funding, local funds, and state categorical funding, really can become innovative and an art. One of the most important parts of the planning early process is ensuring you have the correct economically disadvantaged count. The law states that the district that operates a school breakfast program must use the funds received and is not a may. The end of the subsection refers to the per pupil for whom the district receives funds, which relates back to the previous year's ed count, which is used in the allocation formula. As we move into fiscal year 25 and the grant cycle, it is important for all district leaders to be aware of a great change for Michigan's children. There are grants in their second year to implement the Michigan School Meals Program so that all students can eat breakfast and lunch for free. On this slide, you will see that there has been many announcements and resources created by the Office of Health and Nutrition Services regarding the new legislation and the grants related to the Michigan School Meals Program. As districts opt into this program, all students can eat free. The resources include the FAQs, templates of the family letter, forms, flyers, and more, which all can be found on our Michigan Department of Education website. In addition to the general Michigan School Meals resources, there are specific resources that I want to highlight regarding buildings that become community eligibility provision nutrition programs, including the new education benefits form. The ONS, along with our team, wants LEAs to remember the education benefit form, previously known as the Household Information Report, still must be collected to accurately report the number of ED eligible students in the district. These student counts are used for a variety of education programs and grants, including grant allocation formulas, accountability measures, and more. The announcement shared flyers that can be sent home to parents to encourage them to continue to fill out the education benefit form or the education nutrition benefit application, previously known as the free and reduced price meals application. Schools should send home the correct form or application based on the type of nutrition program they operate. One allowable use with Section 31A is called school-wide reform. When deciding to transform the district, it's important to understand that the transformation itself will not work on its own. Districts must also attend to building the capacity of leadership, central and building, to sustain the transformation process. This is a systemic process. It's intentional for a reason and will require modifications and deep reflection to be successful. Here are the assurances for utilizing school-wide reform. School-wide reform is by the building, not the district. The building must implement a Tier 1 evidence-based model. The need should have been identified in the needs assessment. All strategies should be included in the MyKIP goals. And the building must have 40% or more students that are at-risk eligible. And additionally, the plan must include parent and community supports. And before the district plans on spending all that money, let's be sure we have uncovered the root cause for dysfunctional systems. Uncovering the root cause is not an easy conversation to have or facilitate, but having the courage to confront what's holding the district back from being successful can help to uncover some biases, hidden agendas, and discomforts that are impacting how you are supporting and servicing students who are at promise. The VABES, the district's communicated values, assumptions, behaviors, and expectations, and every district has them because of the people that are employed there, are defined as the ideas about what is right and wrong, values, desirable and undesirable, normal and abnormal, proper and improper. Assumptions, as the term is used here, are the unquestioned standards about people, life, and the way things are. People who grow up in particular cultures share certain values and assumptions. The V, A, and B help create the expectations which are translated into policies and procedures that help uphold the status quo. Facilitating an honest discussion with central administration, building leaders, and staff will help everyone get a clearer understanding of the mission, realign the vision, and help move the district towards more growth and proficiency for students. Here's an example of intentional and collaborative planning for use of school-wide reform in a district in a K-5 building. They have enough students to qualify by the building for school-wide reform. Their needs assessment revealed a comprehensive need for third graders that are not on reading grade level by the end of the school year. Students in kindergarten are also not achieving reading proficiency. Chronic absenteeism also seems to be a barrier for these students and parents. District and building leadership engaged in this year-long process together. So here is how the district went about this process. Stakeholders were invited to review the curriculums. There was a year of testing, reviewing with teachers, students, parents, and community members. There were ongoing stakeholder meetings throughout the consensus building and voting. They determined the parent components that were needed to support parents for chronic absenteeism. They ensured proactive attendance initiatives were also built in with the curriculum. And they looked at up-to-date reading curriculum materials with staff-embedded training and coaching. Here is a poor example of the school-wide reform process. One person determined how large portions of Section 31A should be spent after looking at the needs assessment data, which revealed that many of the ninth graders are not proficient in 8th grade algebra skills. The high school has also tracked a high percentage of behavioral referrals in the first semester of their first year of high school. As a result, many of the teaching staff are taking off work too, calling in frequently. After reviewing the data, the high school principal, knowing that the district has a large amount of carryover of Section 31A, requested to buy Lumine technology to organize attendance and referral data for the high school as a school-wide reform measure. This application of school-wide reform would be inappropriate, given that the software program will help all students versus adding an extra layer of support to at-risk eligible students in ninth grade. In addition, buying technology and software alone is not an evidence-based practice, and finally will not help address the root cause of ninth graders' bad behavior and academic deficiency. Research pinpoints a few traps to avoid when contemplating the usage of school-wide reform measures in schools. Some of them are ignoring root causes, targeting solutions with little or no basis in research or experiential support, only using one high-stakes measure during needs assessment exploration, and not inviting important stakeholders to the conversation, planning, and implementation. Research compiled on evidence-based practices suggests the following reforms work best: job-embedded professional learning and support for programming and monitoring for fidelity of implementation, intentionally involving parents and community stakeholders, limiting assessments to only what is necessary, and ensuring whatever model is picked is the right fit for your school community and demographics. Up to this point, we have shared many reminders of the legislative requirements. Please take a moment to read over the slide to look at all of the latest updates. This slide is a reminder of the annual timeline for Section 31A. It's beneficial for districts to review this with the Continuous Improvement Team and the Business Office for planning purposes. Because Section 31A funding is state categorical funding, it follows the state fiscal year from October 1st through September 30th. If there are any changes to the legislation, those take effect on October 1st. October 20th is the date designated for the first monthly state aid payment, which is prorated monthly. The 3 required MSDS count days are listed here for fall, winter, and spring. Once students are identified as at-risk eligible during that first count period in October, they remain on the list all year. Students may become at-risk eligible and be added to the list throughout the year. For the next academic year, they may not be considered at risk, so it's important for the team to identify students annually. The due date for the APFR is indicated here, which is July 15th, and the final state aid payment of the year is distributed by August 20th. Take a moment to review these subsections. Subsection 3, A through D, describes the allocation formula. In subsection 4, the newest piece, the opportunity index. In subsection 19, describes proration. And lastly, subsection 20 talks about the dissolving of districts.
This slide shows the steady increase in funding for Section 31A from a $378 million allocation in 2017 to this year's allocation of over $1 billion. As a point of reference, the Title I allocation in 2025 is $508 million, making the total amount of funding districts in Michigan receive from federal Title I-A just under half the amount that districts receive in Section 31A funding.
Legislators continue to prioritize supports for at-risk eligible students with significant increases in Section 31A funding. In recent years, and for the first time, Section 31A was fully funded and districts received the full 11.5% of their foundation allowance for each student identified as economically disadvantaged in the previous fall collection. This is the second year that legislation has provided the Opportunity Index to differentiate allocations. The Opportunity Index provides proportionally more funding for those districts with higher levels of students who are economically disadvantaged. This slide shows the Opportunity Index multiplier that districts could expect to receive should Section 31A be fully funded. So rather than all districts receiving the 11.5% of the foundation allowance, for districts with 0 to 19% of their students identified as economically disadvantaged, the Opportunity Index multiplier is 35% of the foundation allowance, a significant increase from 11.5%. And for districts with 20 to 43% of their students identified as economically disadvantaged, the multiplier is 36% of the foundation allowance. Districts with between 44 and 58% receive 37.5% of the foundation allowance. Districts between 59 and 72 receive 39%. Districts between 73 and 84% of their students identified as economically disadvantaged would receive 42% of the foundation allowance. And then districts who have between 85% and all of their students identified as economically disadvantaged, they would receive 47% of the foundation allowance in Section 31A funding. And having shared that, we have a ways to go before we're fully funded. The current $1 billion allocation is approximately 1/3 of what would be required to fund Section 31A at the levels that these multipliers indicate. So on this slide, we can take a look at what allocations will look like at the current level of funding. This slide shows examples for districts with, for example, 8% of their student population having been identified as economically disadvantaged. That would have an opportunity index of 35.4%. And since the allocation is about 1/3 of what would be required to fully fund, 1/3 of the 35.4% opportunity index is about 11.55%. So this district would receive 11.55% of the foundation allowance, which is not too different than the effective weight in previous years. So they would receive about $1,110 for each student identified as economically disadvantaged. And on this slide, you can see represented all the way to the bottom, a district with 100% of their students identified as economically disadvantaged. Their opportunity index is at the highest level, 47%, and 1/3 of 47%, approximately 15.3%. So they have an increase of nearly 4 percentage points in their effective weight, giving them about $1,473 per economically disadvantaged students. Again, it would take about $3 billion to fully fund Section 31A and provide districts this level of Section 31A according to these multipliers. The MDE website includes links to many allocation resources, including District's 24-25 estimated Section 31A allocation, state aid financial status reports for each district, a state school aid monthly newsletter, and additional information about state aid payments. These links can be accessed at the MDE OES State and Federal Program Allocations webpage and also the Office of State Aid and School Finance webpage. And now a little bit more on the new subsection 14, expanded use of funds. Under subsection 14A, eligible districts in opportunity index bands 5 or 6 with buildings that have 73% or greater students identified as economically disadvantaged can choose to use up to 30% of their total allocation to reduce the student-to-teacher ratio in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. Under subsection 14B, LEAs may also use up to an additional 30% to support retention and recruitment efforts to reduce staff turnover and vacancies in instructional and support staff. Examples of generally allowable strategies aligned with subsection 14A include the hiring of additional teachers, for example, the creation of new sections in kindergarten through 3rd grade, increasing the number of certified and endorsed teachers. It's a direct way to reduce the teacher to pupil ratio, and this strategy can be leveraged to avoid split level classrooms. LEAs can also implement team teaching, which would be having 2 or more teachers working together to plan, teach, and monitor a single group of students. This strategy can help distribute the workload, add new expertise to a team, or diversify teaching styles. Districts can also choose to increase flexible groupings or to utilize teaching assistants. The Section 31A, subsection 14 through 16 frequently asked questions document can be found on the Section 31A website and has additional information that may be helpful to districts who indicate they will be utilizing funds according to these new flexibilities. Eligible districts who opt to take advantage of the new expanded use of funds in subsection 14 must ensure their efforts align to the needs assessment, are supported by their MTSS framework, that no administrative costs are funded with Section 31A. They must ensure the initiatives do not supplant existing funding and that they are maintaining previous salaries and costs. LEAs must report their intent to use the new flexibilities to MDE by November 1st, and districts may use the expanded flexibilities for 3 fiscal years. And if you're not currently receiving the MDE weekly updates, we want to encourage you to visit our forms and instructions page. Once there, scroll to the bottom and enter your email address, then click Submit. You'll have an opportunity to create a password, and that will allow you to manage your MDE subscriptions. Our Section 31A team of consultants is available for questions, technical assistance, and to support as a thought partner. This slide shows the area of the state supported by each of our consultants. Your assigned contact serves as the first line of information and support. We currently have a vacancy, so for areas designated in green, please reach out to the Section 31A General mailbox. That address can be found on our website, and one of our team members will respond to your inquiry. Thank you for joining us today. We hope the webinar has provided clarity around the important components of Section 31A. Please feel free to reach out to our team with any questions you may have, and have a great rest of your day.